Okay, so the as a follow up for my last video about Scott Mendelson's tweets, he finally did his article, and I couldn't wait for Jeff Hicks and the World Class Bullshitters to post their takedown of this because Scott Mendelson is like, it all makes sense now. It all does. It all makes sense. Scott Mendelson hates Star Wars fans. He hates Star Wars fans. He hates them personally. And he hated them before The Last Jedi. You know, I could kind of understand if all of the fandom menace stuff about how we dive into everything that he says, and Jeff Hicks puts him on display every so often. I could kind of understand if you would have something against us afterward, but no, he played his hand in this review, and it makes sense that the reason why he liked The Last Jedi was because he hates Star Wars fans, and he knew that we hated it. He knew that we were insulted by The Last Jedi, and so he was happy about it. He was happy that we were insulted. So I'm going to get to that in a little bit, but here we go. The review: Rise of Skywalker is the worst Star Wars movie ever. The Rise of Skywalker is a bad movie and a miserable finale that serves no purpose other than to reassure adult fans of the original Star Wars and that they are still the chosen ones of the pop culture galaxy. Well, I have bad news for you, Scott. It doesn't do that either. You don't seem... Because you haven't actually been paying attention to the movies, because you don't care about the lore, you have no idea what we actually want. And you never have. You don't understand what Star Wars is to us, what the story is to us. I don't know what you think Star Wars is, but you definitely don't care about the lore. This movie shits all over the lore, just like the last two did. That's the part that you don't understand. We're not gonna like this movie because the story is shit. It's never been about who's being pandered to. Like, okay, there's fan service in this movie, and you hate the fan service. Cool. The fan service is not going to make the movie good for Star Wars fans if the plot still sucks. They're bringing back Emperor Palpatine. Oh, you're thinking that's fan service. You think you think Star Wars fans are gonna like that, but you don't know Star Wars fans. We're not gonna like that just because they do that. In fact, I think it's cringeworthy. I think it's entirely stupid. I would rather they have explained Snoke. I've made several videos about that, but because Rian Johnson destroyed Snoke in the last movie without doing anything with him, now JJ has to pull a villain out of somewhere, because the whole point was for them to do the redemption arc with Kylo Ren. They were always going to do a repeat of that because nothing in these movies are original. So you can't have Kylo Ren actually be the big bad guy. That actually might be original. That actually might be interesting. Instead, we have to have another big villain in here. Now, I don't know if Rian Johnson would have done that, like if he actually would have made Kylo Ren actually the villain if it had actually gone into episode 3, because I never believed that in the first place. I always believed that they were going to do the redemption storyline with Kylo Ren because he's a Skywalker, and we've already done it twice now. I always thought that was going to happen. So, and this goes into these other paragraphs: given the loud and friendly backlash, blah, 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 blah. The problem with Star Wars Rise of Skywalker isn't just that it absolutely walks back a number of potent reveals and plot threads from the last movie, but rather that the 142-minute movie spends almost its entire running time retconning its predecessor and adding painfully conventional plot twists, and patronizing reversals in the name of mollifying the fans who merely want to be reminded of the first 3 movies. Except it still doesn't do that. It inflicts additional damage on the legacy of the first 6 Star Wars movies. You say it in your next sentence, so maybe you do get it. Maybe you do get it, Scott. Maybe you do see that these movies have been inflicting damage on the Star Wars franchise. That's exactly why we don't like them in the first place. It has nothing to do with... let me get to my other one, to your other paragraph in a second, because your other paragraph is where you really play your hand. He starts describing a little bit of the movie through here. He really lays into the scene with Carrie Fisher. And you know what? frankly speaking, Carrie Fisher, Leia should have died in the Last Jedi if they were going to do anything with her at all. If they were gonna make her a Force ghost, and the whole point of the movie is that you're doing your Force ghost stuff at the end, they should have just killed her right there in the middle of the Last Jedi. That would have been better, but instead we have to have this really stupid scene of her flying her ass back to the ship, and now we're left wondering. Now I knew when Carrie Fisher actually did tragically pass away, that, they were going to have her character in the next movie. They said, no, we're going to continue having her in this movie. And it's like, you can't just let her rest in peace. You can't just not have Leia in this movie. You couldn't have written her out for some other reason. You had to stubbornly insist on bringing her back just so you can make her a Force ghost. That's on you. That's your own thing. You made that decision, so you get to live with how bad it looks. He starts describing the plot of the movie, and again, okay, so if you're saying that the entire movie is a MacGuffin chase, then yeah, you know what? At some point you can be an actual film critic and call something out the way that it is. It is a MacGuffin chase with a lot of really convenient Deus Ex Machina in there, isn't it? You've got them finding in the sand pit the exact thing that they were looking for just because. I mean, yeah, okay, I get that, but it's a mess of a movie on those grounds. Sure, I'm with you. I agree with all of that. Here's the big paragraph. Here's the big killer paragraph, where Scott lays into all of us for all these crimes that we did, for that are somehow our fault. It's not just that Rise of Skywalker undoes Last Jedi, it's not your franchise anymore metaphors aimed at a generation that grew up loving Star Wars and then allowed two Palpatine-ish leaders, George Bush and Trump, to come into power. So let me stop you right there. I never voted for George Bush or Donald Trump. I am a Star Wars fan. I'm the one you're sitting here insulting. I didn't do that. I was too young to vote for George Bush. Again, I'm a much younger Star Wars fan than you seem to be. Than you seem to think. I'm younger than you seem to think all Star Wars fans are. So I wasn't even old enough to vote for George Bush, and I definitely didn't vote for Donald Trump. So somehow I don't apply to your little thing right here. But even so, what the hell does this have to do with anything? Are you genuinely saying that the reason why you hate Star Wars fans is because George Bush and Donald Trump were elected president? How does that make sense? How is that grounds to stand on? How are you writing that in this review that's supposed to be about a movie? How are you even bringing this up? How is this relevant to anything? And even if you think it's relevant, and it's not, it doesn't apply to every Star Wars fan. In fact, I would say it probably doesn't apply to most of us. Because you've got Star Wars fans in Europe, you've got Star Wars fans in Japan, you've got Star Wars fans in Australia and Latin America, you've got Star Wars fans all over the world. All of us couldn't have voted for Donald Trump. How does this have anything to do with that? Do you not understand how stupid you sound right now? Come on, man. It has nothing to do with anything. Come into power for generic, don't worry, Star Wars is still the best. Again, you don't get it. That's not gonna work. You think they're doing this for us, but it's not gonna work. We have been criticizing the blatant pandering to nostalgia right along with everybody else. The Fandom Menace doesn't like it either. We think it's cheap. We think it's cheesy. These movies don't know how to do callbacks and fan service. If you want to know how to do it properly, go look at The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian integrates those references and does it naturally in a way. Rogue One had a lot of them too, but even some of them were overhanded, and we said as much. So stop trying to pretend that the reason why this movie's bad is because it's pandering to us. No, it's bad because it's not written well. Because it has no story to start from. Because the story started shaky to begin with in Force Awakens, and what little was there gets actively undermined in The Last Jedi, and you seem to enjoy that whole process. But I have a question then for you, Scott. If the whole point of Episode 8 was to rip apart everything that happened in Episode 7, how do you plan to follow that with a conclusion? How do you plan to follow that? You're obviously not a storyteller, so you're thinking to yourself, it's not your job, someone else is going to have to do it. I'm looking at that going, there is no possible way that even the best storyteller could have rescued that plot. And it definitely isn't J.J. Abrams, because J.J. Abrams isn't a good storyteller. So it has nothing to do with that. You're placing your blame in entirely the wrong direction. In fact, you should probably be looking a little inward on yourself. Because you can't have a movie that completely destroys a story and then expect to follow that with something. It's fine if it's a standalone. So you make a lot of these claims here, and I'm gonna get to the your final thing here. The Rise of Skywalker is possibly worse than any prior Star Wars episode. It ends a legendary franchise with a thud, while denying the new trilogy its artistic reason for existence. So you're making that claim. You're selfishly taking that claim all for yourself. That the reason we have a sequel trilogy is to artistically and metaphorically insult a whole generation of people, 2 generations of people. Because my dad's a Star Wars fan. He's probably more the age that you think that you're thinking of when you're insulting an entire group of people. But my dad and me are 2 generations that love this. And what you're saying is that you wanted us to be insulted together. That's what you're saying. That made you happy. Why are you so petty? What did I ever do to you? Let me ask you that. What did I ever do to you? What did all these Star Wars fans do to you, Scott? Why are you so bitter? I can't believe it. It represents the cultural theft of Star Wars from today's kids by today's arrested development-stricken adults. Come on, why are you so bitter, Scott? This entire paragraph is nothing but the bitterness of an old man. And I don't get it. That you're not even talking about the movie anymore. So, let me break it down for you. Again, because look, Star Wars is a franchise first and foremost for children, and the kids that grew up with Harry Potter, the Hunger Games, and the MCU have embraced harsh truths and challenging narratives. I grew up with Harry Potter, and I grew up with Star Wars. Okay? Episode 1 came out in 1999? How old was I? I was 11 years old when Episode 1 first came out. Episode 1 was supposed to be for kids. It was directed right at me, and I loved it. As an adult, I can look back and say that there was plenty wrong with it, and I can understand why people that were existing Star Wars fans didn't enjoy it, but I definitely did. I enjoyed Attack of the Clones, too, when it first came out, and I first saw it in theaters a bunch. I still say that there's plenty wrong with those movies, but together, all 3 of them were made just to be movies, and they could pander to kids. I'm not saying that they shouldn't. So I love Star Wars Rebels. Star Wars Rebels definitely plays to kids, but it's consistent. It pays homage. It doesn't try to insult the lore of Star Wars. It embraces Star Wars. I can watch when my niece is older. I could sit down and watch that cartoon with her, and both of us will enjoy it because it's just made to be content that people are supposed to enjoy. I have absolutely no problem with Star Wars being for kids. I have no problem with that. Although I have a hard time believing that you think the entire saga is just for kids, or have you not seen a little movie called Revenge of the Sith? How is that a kids movie? How are any of these movies kids movies? May I remind you that they are all rated PG-13? How are any of these PG-13 movies supposed to be directed at kids? That's the little flaw in your logic that you don't seem to understand. Also, I love the MCU too, and I wouldn't say the MCU is geared towards kids. Or did you not see Captain America: The Winter Soldier? That's definitely not a kids movie. Neither is Captain America: Civil War. If you break down some of the deeper themes in there, those aren't kids movies. Those are movies for young adults. Those are kids. Those are movies aimed at teenagers. Okay. You know, people that are closer in my age than your age, I think. Lucasfilm and Disney's The Rise of Skywalker feels explicitly crafted for the Rian Johnson ruined Star Wars and George Lucas ruined my childhood demographics. Yeah, except George Lucas never ruined my childhood. In fact, George Lucas did a lot of really good things for my childhood because I played Star Wars video games too. This movie isn't trying to appease me, because if it was trying to appease me, it would do many different things. It would not have the insulting ending that it has. that completely invalidates the entire point of the prequel trilogy and the sequel trilogy. Now Luke Skywalker and Anakin Skywalker's sacrifices and struggles are all completely irrelevant thanks to this movie and thanks to Last Jedi. They're all completely irrelevant. Oh yeah, totally pandering to me, right? No, I'm going to hate this movie too. You know what? I'm going to hate this movie too. And it's not because of it's not because I liked Last Jedi like you do. It's not because I have some political reason for wanting to hate this movie. No, it's just a bad Star Wars movie. They've just been bad Star Wars movies. Like, I think the whole world will make way more sense to you if you could stop it with this conspiracy mongering crap that you're doing and instead just look at it logically. These are bad Star Wars movies. We don't like bad Star Wars movies. Do you see us criticizing and hating on Rogue One? Because we love Rogue One. How does it make sense to you then that all of a sudden we love The Mandalorian? All of these things are just point to a much simpler world than the one that you're living in. I don't know what world you're living in where all of these other things are more important than just making a good story, making a consistent story. That's all we've ever wanted. It's very simple. So, I don't know why you're so bitter, Scott Mendelson, and I don't know why you hate Star Wars fans so much. But at the end of the day, you're flat out wrong. This movie is not bad because it's pandering to fans. This movie's bad because it has a terrible story to work with, and this terrible story comes from the fact that the two movies that came before it also told bad stories. It's really, really that simple. So, that's pretty much it for this article. I have a hard time understanding the way that this man thinks, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Jeff and the World Class Bullshitters have to say about this too, but I had to throw my 2 cents in there. So, thank you guys for watching. If you guys like any of these things that I'm doing, I'm still, I'm going to post my review for Rise of Skywalker when I see it. If you guys are interested in hearing about that, so hit that subscribe button and check out more of my videos later. In the meantime, it's KT Vindicare.